Good morning. Welcome to the Board of County Commissioners meeting for Tuesday, March 21st. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. First item we have is a hearing on ordinance 23-02-003L, amending Article 6, Division 3 of the Coos County Code. Basically, what this amendment does is that instead of it being appealed to the county commissioners, is appealed to our new, like the magistrate judge. And this was based upon a recommendation from somebody in the audience. So that's what this is about. We're going to change it from the commissioner's hearing to an independent judge who's a retired attorney to hear the case on appeal.
This has to do with people who have been excluded from county properties for one reason or another. A good example of that would be we've had in years past, I think we're getting a better handle on it, some out of control parties at some of our county parks. These are family facilities. They're not facilities for a bunch of people to go get drunk and carry on all hours of the night and do all kinds of bad things. So we've, in times past, we've excluded them from the county parks for a period of time. It kind of comes from us, and then we hear the appeal. That was inappropriate, and that was brought up at a public hearing, and so we've dealt with this differently now. So the appeal is heard by someone who is not invested in having these people excluded from county property.
The same thing with people who have been excluded from the county forest. We're illegally cutting down merchantable trees, or in several cases over the past years, they take it upon themselves, it's nice and convenient to make firewood out of a log deck that's being marketed. So we have told those people they can't come back for at least a year or more.
That also covers disposal of garbage illegally, which is a breathtakingly common and egregious violation that we see with regularity, and we are thinking about other solutions to solve that problem as well. But I just also want to comment, this comes from public comment right here. So, you know, everybody has valuable input to the processes that we undertake here. So thank you all for being here today.
So we have a three-step process we must complete. The first is to read the ordinance. Commissioner, do you want to do that, or do you want me to do it?
You can read the changes. I think
no, it's just the title is all we have to read.
Okay, sure. But there's the changes on the back page on section 3.
Go ahead.
And the changes on the back page of page 19. Hearings of appeal shall be held by the hearings officer appointed by the board order. The board, or we appoint a board or appoint a hearings officer. In this case, is going to be a hearings officer. The board or hearings officer may alter the date and time for the hearing. The hearings officer appointed by the board may designate a county employee to set the date and time for the appeal of the hearing after consulting with the hearings officer. The county shall issue a notice of the hearing to the person filing a written appeal of the exclusion, starting the date, time, and place for the hearing on the appeal filed. Notice the hearing shall be issued as soon as reasonable after the date of hearing has been set. The hearings officer shall issue the final decision, and the a hearings officer or appointed board, not the commissioner, on the appeal date shall have a final decision of the county's exclusion under this division. The county's final decision will be appealable by a timely writ of review filed in Coos County Circuit Court pursuant to ORS 34.010 or 34.102. That's the essence of the changes.
Okay, what we have to do, the first step is to read the ordinance by title. I'll do that. It's ordinance 23-02-003L. It's an ordinance amending Article 6 of the Coos County Code to modify the rules and regulations for hearing appeals of exclusions from county buildings and other property. So, with that, we are to take public comment if there is any.
Well, of course, we have to have a motion for your comment, so I need a motion.
I move to accept public comment on the ordinance.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, now discussion. Board first. David, Rod?
No, not at this
Okay,
time.
I see Mr. Thompson has a hand up. Come forward. Yeah, come on up. Anybody else, by the way? Okay, David, okay, you're next.
Philip Thompson,
Hi, Bill.
Coos Bay. How are you guys this
Bill,
morning?
very well, thank you.
So, first of all, is this retroactive to a certain date? I see it's got some kind of date there.
Not unless you're involved in it.
Well,
That
I
would
am
be the only
involved
case.
So know what I was getting at, you know, things happened before. Well, I'm not here to argue with you. I just want to tell you that this thing is so ambiguous. You can read it any way you want to. If the people here had all had a copy of this, I don't think it would have ever got this far. We have an ordinance, you can't smoke walking the county road, and Seven Devils are out in the county forest, don't bear fear in water that deep. So when you've left out the boat ramps, county roads and other things, you know. The good stuff was you mentioned it, the garbage, the thefts, everybody goes along with that, but you're picking up everybody for anything if you want to. What's the limit on mushrooms? 12? You got people that's going to violate this law, these laws that don't know anything about it. And as far as the retroactive thing I asked, when we had the big deal where everybody had to go virtual on the TV, we quit having a meeting, Bob would have violated a state mandate, which means he would have to leave. And everybody here is from Bandon. When Melissa got up and took off her and John,
Phil, you're addressing us, not them.
okay, her and John, she was scared for her life. So each and every one of them that was involved in this would have to be excluded from the county property and stuff. It's so much in here. The smoking, like I said, on the boat launches, on the road out there, if you're out of your vehicle or in the car, the whole thing. This is crazy. And if the people stands up and takes this, fine. If we want to stop the garbage and the thefts and stuff, let's write it in a real simple deal. And don't delegate your authority. That would be the road master, the park sheriff, and Jill, Lance Morgan, and them would have the authority to really exclude you. Then you got to wait until you have a hearing before you can even. You're excluded from a property, even if the hearing judge would disagree with the people that done it. The delegation of authority and stuff like this, plus you can delegate other people. That's crazy. And I would wish that you turn it up or burn it up right now rather than subject everybody in this county to the laws that you can enforce them any way you want to. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Phil.
Okay. Yep. David? Anybody else?
Yeah,
You've got one
Oh,
online.
somebody online somewhere? I keep forgetting about that.
Oh, it looks like Rob.
Oh, okay, Rob. Go ahead, David.
good morning, Commissioners. My name is Dan Jennings from BOC. I wanted to talk about the applicability of the ordinance to, public meetings, mainly the Board of Commissioners. Because I do have concerns specifically about that. The Attorney General of Oregon's manual on public meetings strongly recommends that you not ban people from future meetings for disrupting behavior or other behavior at other meetings. And the League of Oregon Cities has a problem with disrupting people at meetings, and they also say it's very questionable whether you can have a future ban because of disruption of a particular meeting. I realize at times it's very tempting to have some people not allowed in public meetings, but I think if you look especially at some of the court cases that are cited by the League of Oregon Cities, you see you have to have very strong evidence that the person is either a threat to public safety or clearly I don't know what the right word would be, but clearly have a good case to show that they are likely to disrupt a public meeting. And there are a bunch of reasons why the Attorney General thinks that it's questionable to ban people from future meetings. Obviously, Oregon law gives people a right to attend these meetings, even in meetings where they're not allowed to make public comments. There was a case out of Portland where a man was given a 60-day exclusion because he got very loud and disruptive at a city council meeting, and that case went to the federal district court that found that that was unreasonable. I'm not saying there might be some instances where that might not be legitimate. I mean, somebody attacked the board and got dragged off and said, well, I'll be back, next week to finish the job. That would be pretty dramatic evidence against it. You could do that. But I think on the whole, you have to be very careful, and that's different than just telling somebody, well, you can't be on the county forest for a couple of weeks. You're not allowed in a particular county business. I mean, the right to attend a meeting and when there's comment to comment is a pretty basic right that I don't think you can take away from somebody unless you have very strong evidence that you need to do that either to protect the proceedings itself or to protect public safety. Now, I think on the whole, despite some of the dust up and criticism the board has gotten, this board and prior boards have been very willing and open to having public participation. But we have to remember when we're writing an ordinance or writing a law that this applies for some period of time going forward. We're also in a period of time where there's a lot more intensity and anger and passion about political issues. And I think we all have to be very, very careful to distinguish between things that are said that are somewhat offensive or loud or maybe inappropriate and something that should strip somebody of their right to attend meetings or speak at meetings. And again, I don't know what the exact language should be, but I think there should be a specific carve out for public meetings that say you have to make some sort of showing that the person has a good likelihood of being disruptive or threatening public safety before you can tell them that they are not allowed at public meetings. And obviously under this system, somebody can appeal it, but before you could hold a hearing, there would obviously be meetings that this person would not be allowed to attend. So I'm uneasy about the ordinance, especially as it relates to that. I don't mean by that to think that this board at least would arbitrarily just decide to ban somebody for a meeting and not have good reason. But especially if you looked at that fairly short publication, League of Oregon Cities, you'd see a number of cases, law cases, court decisions cited in federal court that I think you might give you pause as to whether you really want to quite have this kind of language as it applies to meetings of the board and other meetings from county bodies. So anyway, that's what I have to say. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
I think in rare past meetings, many years ago, I can remember one or two people got out of control, so to say. I don't know if one person's control is different from another person's control, but they were escorted out the door by the sheriff at that time. But they were told as soon as they could calm down, they could come right back. Which, sometimes people get really excited and need to recollect themselves a little bit and make better points. But other than that, I don't know that ever has anybody been excluded from or being demonstrative or really excited about a particular subject near and dear to their heart.
Well, and I've been to a lot of meetings, not as many as you have, but I can't ever recall anybody being kicked out of a meeting and then excluded from public for further meetings. And I don't think I've ever seen any behavior that in my mind, or I think in a reasonable person's mind, would justify banning somebody from a meeting later on.
So
I just hope that doesn't happen.
the only person I can really remember, which turned out to be really funny, was this person was really going off and jumping all over and waving his arms and screaming and hollering. And we had the sheriff, I wasn't the board chair at that time, but had the sheriff escort him out. And as soon as he got outside into the, outside the courtroom when we used to be over in the courthouse itself, he looks up at the sheriff and says, "How did I do?"
Well, I think I know who you're talking about.
Which is a big act as far as, it was Mr. Arnold, he's long gone now, but it was pretty funny and learning that it was all an act that he was putting on.
Well, I'm glad that the board understands that. I still have concerns over having an ordinance that doesn't make it explicit. You have to have a higher standard of school people.
And I think that the essence of this, which we're talking about today, is an amendment. To my knowledge, it doesn't change anything, except it does guard against, let's use the example that you just gave. If we got excited because someone else did something during a board meeting and said, "You're excluded from this meeting for a year," we wouldn't be the ones that would sit in on the appeal. This hearings officer would. So to me, it's giving protection. You know, I guess anyone can make a false charge at some point in time, and this gives some protection against unreasonable or false charge.
Well, I appreciate that, but again, with the hearings officer, I can't really visualize you could get a hearing like, let's say, you're gonna have another meeting in a week or a few days. I doubt seriously you can get a hearing before that time. I think you are right to put it in the hands of someone else rather than the board. But again, I'm just nervous because, for instance, I understand why people want access to the county boards and county buildings, but there isn't a law in Oregon that says you have a right to be in the county courts. There is a law in Oregon that clearly says you have a right to be in public meetings. So I really would like to see something that made it clear that you have to have a pretty high quantum of proof before you tell somebody they can't be at a future public meeting.
Your comments are well taken, David, and I appreciate it. I would second Commissioner Sweet's observation that we're not talking about passing the ordinance itself. We're talking about an amendment to an existing ordinance, number one, and that amendment does displace that consideration from the board itself to an independent, to another hearings officer. But the other comment that I would make is that it is very difficult to craft language in exactly the right way always to accommodate everybody's concerns. I appreciate your expression about a carve out for public meetings, but I would also harken back to your observation that this board, I believe the prior board, was not predisposed to exclude people based on the content of their speech, that we do want to be open to all public comment, and whether it's in opposition or support, doesn't matter. Everybody has a right to speak as long as rules and standards of decorum are maintained. And finally, I would say that in the interest of that value set, that philosophical basis, that elections have consequences, and we always have to pay attention to who we're voting for and make sure that who we're electing to positions like this have that same value, whether they agree on other issues or not. The value of the right to redress the government and that speech that underlies that is paramount, and so we should always be attentive to that.
I appreciate your comments, commissioners, and I appreciate all of your comments because it does create a record that you understand the sensitivity of this particular issue. Anyway, I just wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you.
Great input.
Anybody else who, yes, come on in. I think you're
We have
David.
Rob too.
David? Rob? Oh,
Yeah, actually,
I keep forgetting.
yeah,
you.
Rob
Mr.
spoke up.
Jones, I think, right?
Yeah, Douglas Jones,
Okay.
Coos Bay.
Morning, Dan.
And I just want to understand, the ordinance. I understand that now what's before you is this amendment to the ordinance. But at this point, I'm kind of confused, about the ordinance itself. If someone was partying at a county park and the county employee cited them in a way that resulted in an exclusion, does that mean they wouldn't be able to go to the county fair? Or, you know, on other county property, or is it specific to the place it happened, or how does that work?
In my experience, it's always been specific to the place it happens. But I
Because it
suspect
wasn't
if
clear to
someone
me,
had-
looking at that ordinance.
Pardon me?
It wasn't clear to me. looking at
I
the ordinance
suspect
how
if
that-
someone had a long record of going around at different county meetings and different county properties and was everywhere, always inappropriate, you might have a broader exclusion, but in my experience, it's been very specific to parks for a certain period of time, if there was an issue at a park.
So the citation is written kind of in that manner?
Yeah.
Parks writes these things
For
out.
that part.
Yeah.
And so it's written in, you know, and this, if we make an inappropriate decision and trespass someone from a facility, this gives that person protection. And I don't know how to give immediate protection. There has to be a period between the action and the exclusion and then the appeal. But, you know,
You know, I think it's a good amendment. I'm just trying to-
I do too, and it came from this very body. Someone suggested here that, you know, if it's not in keeping with the way our government runs. We separate the executive authorities and legislative authorities and judicial authorities. And we've taken a step toward doing that with this amendment.
And that leads to my other question about the ordinance itself is, in these situations, how do county employees who are issuing these citations, how do they interface with law enforcement? I mean, it seems like in certain situations, and in many situations, there would be laws that have been broken. And so is then that referred to the sheriff's office, or how does that work?
Well, it could be, but there, you know, in the current environment, we're gonna run into the limitations of the district attorney's office anyway. You know, they cannot get to the priority cases that are before them. And so, you know, minor offenses sort of fall by the wayside. But I wanted to speak to your prior comment too about, or your question about whether a violation on one county property excludes from all county property. For instance, the fair, the example you used. And, you know, and I don't really see a clear answer to that in the original ordinance text here. It's a great question. I think that the spirit of the law is not intended to say you littered in the county forest, therefore you can't go to the fair. There's nothing clearly defined here to codify that, and that's a good point. But again, you know, it's kind of at the stage that it's at right now. It is subject kind of to the determination of the parties at hand, right? And so I'll go back to my prior comment. Elections have consequences. You know, understand the philosophy of the people you're voting for, and that's not to say that errors or omissions shouldn't be addressed. It's just to make that other point.
Well, just why this ordinance might be a good time to consider these other issues.
And your question about law enforcement, quite often, if available, because we have limited officers, so they may be who knows where on another call. Probably more importance than just people being loud and obnoxious at 3 a.m.
Yeah, I understand the intent of the ordinance, and I agree with you fully. But while you're looking at it, these were some questions.
Well,
that I
maybe-
didn't see addressed in the way that I understood.
Maybe
Good questions.
make some more comments and we can modify again.
Okay, all right, well, thank you for your time.
That's why we're doing this one, is because somebody brought it up. How can you hear a case when you're the ones that excluded the person? Well, good idea here. I didn't even realize. Yeah.
We got Rob.
Oh, Rob Taylor online.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Rob Taylor from Bandon here. When was the original ordinance passed?
I have no idea.
July 17th, 2018.
Okay, I don't remember.
That was
Be
the
the
last
most recent
modification.
update.
Yeah.
Okay.
The last modification was in 18. I think it's
Okay.
much longer than that.
All right, because I had some concerns with the due process of this, and I understand now you have a public hearings officer, and you now are going to go through a little bit more of a process than you yourself as the board adjudicating this. So that alleviates a lot of concerns that I did have. Because I don't think that anyone who creates the law should be adjudicating that same law. So I agree with you in that complete legal concept. I do wonder, because when I read the law, I agree with the gentleman who just came up before me. It appears to me that if you get kicked off of state fair property for 2 years because of what you did at the state fair, you're completely kicked off of all county property. And so if the wording, is coming across that way to many of us who are just lay people, it may come across that same way to someone who's a public hearings officer, or someone who may come foul of the law and not understand that they can object to being kicked off of all the property. So I would definitely look at that. The one thing that did bother me about this is that at the end of this ordinance, you declared it an emergency. Why?
I think we have something here, helping our county council in his absence. Perhaps you could speak to that. Could you introduce yourself and tell people what you're doing so they know what?
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Audrey Boyer from Paul Walker, filling in for Nathaniel Hall Johnson. To the questions about whether the exclusion would be specific or general, it's important to first note that the standard for the exclusion is reasonableness, and that is a term that is defined in the law. And if you look at, let's see, it is section 6.3.060. It states that the person in charge who is making the determination whether a person can be excluded or not has the discretion to make that exclusion from all county property, or that it can be limited to certain specified property or buildings. And it lists a number of factors that are to be taken into account. So you'll have the initial determination by the person in charge, confronted with a person who is acting disruptively, to make the decision about should that person be excluded or not, and then applying these factors, should that exclusion be from all county property or from the specific property where this conduct is occurring. That person's decision then will be what is in front of the hearings officer to determine whether or not these factors were applied in a way that is consistent with the meaning of the term reasonableness under the law. So hopefully that
helps.
answers the question.
It does help.
Very, very much.
Thank you. How about that, Rob?
And the emergency clause, why was the emergency clause added to the end of it? Because if you put an emergency clause, nobody can file a referendum on it. Not that I wanted to file one, but it takes away the advantage of people to do that. And this is what the Oregon legislature does all the time to stop people from stopping bad legislation. So I'm kind of curious as why it it was made an emergency, so it couldn't be filed as a referendum.
So my understanding is that the emergency clause allows the commissioners to make an ordinance effective upon the first reading. That clause, my correspondence with Nathaniel indicated that clause should be removed from the ordinance. Going through this process of the full two-step hearing process means that this is not an emergency clause situation. So, it's my understanding that clause shouldn't be removed.
Okay, section 8.
Correct.
Okay.
So you're saying that's not part of this amendment?
I didn't hear that. What'd you say, Rob?
So what she is saying is that the emergency clause is not part of this amendment?
Well, it is at the moment, but I'm planning on asking the people who, Commissioner Sweet, Commissioner Taylor, to amend their motion to exclude section 8 emergency clause.
Yeah, that's what we'll do.
So Commissioner Sweet, do you want to amend your motion to allow, eliminate section 8 emergency
I don't
clause?
think
I think I,
Oh, I thought you
we're
did.
still having public comment. And the motion would come
No.
next.
the motion was just to
hear
open the
public comment.
public comment.
Okay. So we need a motion including that emergency clause.
Do we have any other public comment first?
I didn't have anybody online at all.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you.
I will move to adopt ordinance 22-02-003L, amending Article 6, Division 3 of the Coos County Code with the provision that the emergency clause is removed from section 8.
Have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Any other comments by board? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to, and by the way, I should interject and back up a little bit. If you have other comments about this particular ordinance, please send it to us and we can send it on to council and have them evaluated. Okay, all right, moving on to 3A, strategic plan presentation by Coos Bay North Bend Visitor Convention Bureau. And Janice, hey.
Good
Good
morning.
morning.
Morning,
I'll do
Janice.
something a little bit different. I'm Janice Longland. I am the Executive Director of the Coos Bay North Bend Charleston Visitor and Convention Bureau. I'm also the President of the Travel Southern Oregon Coast Organization on their Board of Directors. For those who aren't aware, that is the Coos County Tourism Work Group. But we're here today to talk about the Visitor and Convention Bureau and our recent strategic planning process. With me today is Roger Craddock from the City of Coos Bay. He is the City of Coos Bay representative on the VCB board. We also have a representative representing Coos County on our board now. His name is Tim Hyatt. He is with the Sunset Bay Golf Resort and Charleston Merchants Association as the voice for the county on our board. And we now have the county on our board because the voters of Coos County approved the lodging tax on Charleston-only lodging properties at the request of the Merchants Association. So we're very pleased to be here to actually present for the first time as a member of, as the county being a member of our intergovernmental agreement for the VCB. So we started out many years ago as a very stable three-legged stool with the City of Coos Bay, the City of North Bend, and the Cokewell Indian Tribe. We're even more stable now with our four-legged stool that includes Coos County. I won't go too much into the budget, but this just gives you an idea of where we were after a quarter and a half of the fiscal year. We were at about 50% of our income, with only having spent about 34%. Now, none of this budget includes what we are anticipating getting through the Charleston lodging tax. One, because when we did the budget, the vote had not passed yet. And two, we weren't quite sure what to expect from that funding. But what I want to draw your attention to on this next slide is the far right column. This shows how we have grown in the last 5 to 6 years from a very small destination marketing organization to one that now can compete a little bit better with our neighbors on the Central and North Coast. This gives us an opportunity to entice more visitors to come down to our less visited part of the Oregon coast, away from the over visited places on the central and north coast. These next 3 slides, and we're going to go through them rather quickly. This just gives you an idea, a snapshot of what we do in a quarter when we're talking about our destination. And we rebranded our destination as Oregon's Adventure Coast many, many years ago. And so we are now getting a lot of brand awareness through magazines and billboards and marketing opportunities. You can go forward. We also have newspapers, pardon me, though many of those are going by the wayside. We do a lot of broadcast and lots of digital and social media that are reaching visitors to our area. So I wanted to show you where we were pre-pandemic, in the midst of the pandemic, and as we were coming out of the pandemic. Visitors to Coos County spent in the county. This is not monies they spent to get here, but the monies they spent in the county in 2019 totaled $277.3 million that was spent on lodging and dining and grocery stores and gasoline and arts and entertainment, recreation, those types of activities that people pay for when they come on a vacation. I'm going to draw your attention to that lodging spend dollar amount, which was $60.7 million in 2019, was spent at a lodging property in the county. In 2020, when the pandemic hit and everything shut down, we went way down. We lost 35% of our visitor spend, from 277 million down to 179 million. But this was mostly lost in our restaurants and retail. As you guys recall, most of our restaurants were shut down to takeout only. Our retail was closed. But our lodging spend only dropped 5%, which meant people still traveled here. They just didn't spend as much money while they were here because they were doing the things that didn't cost as much. They were out on the beaches and out on the trails. In 2021, we recovered 22% of that spend and are now, we're back up to $218.6 million. But our lodging spend well exceeded that 22% recovery. And we're really pleased with that. Some of that is because, as most of you realized, lodging prices went up. So a per room price was higher than it had been prior to the pandemic. So we take all of this data, we look at big data. In case you weren't aware, we have a big data firm that provides us cell phone and vehicle data on visitors to our area, so we can see where our visitors are coming from, what they're doing when they're here, and this informs how we market our area. But in all the years that this entity has been in existence, we never had a strategic plan. So with us also on the phone is Matthew Landkamer. He is with Whereabout, a strategic planning firm out of Portland. He has many, many years of experience doing this with a firm called Coraggio Group, which is also out of the Portland area. And he guided us through this process. And so this is kind of hard to see, but I'm going to let Matthew jump on here now. He's on the phone with us. Hi, Matthew.
Hello, Janice. Can you hear me all right?
I think we can hear you fine. Yes, thank you.
Great, terrific. Thanks for having me. I will try to be brief but thorough as I go through this. What Janice has pulled up here is an overview of the planning process. It happened in 3 phases, and that first phase is really the most important. That was the discovery phase where we engaged with the community. We pushed a survey out to tourism stakeholders. We got over 25% response rate on that, which we're really happy with. So we got good feedback from the stakeholders, and we also brought in the data that Janice talked about that they have for the VCB and other external trends and patterns from tourism industry, all of which led to a report that informed the planning process. You can see that we did the planning process for a series of 5 workshops and then wrapped up with some final plan documentation during that phase now. The next slide shows the themes that came out of that discovery phase. There were 7, pardon me?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay, there were 7 themes that came out that I shared with the planning team. I'll just go over these briefly here. First off, VCB is really well supported in the community and can leverage that to really do more work to accelerate the visitor economy. There's an opportunity to bolster stakeholder communications. We heard that from stakeholders that want to hear more and more frequently, so you'll see that addressed in the plan. The core assets, natural beauty and outdoor rec, are a basis for building up areas of the visitor economy that are adjacent to that. So ways that we can find to generate more spending in areas around outdoor rec. Social challenges and infrastructure deficits might be limiting the visitor economy in your area, not unusual. Likewise, workforce challenges, and also not unusual, especially up and down the West Coast right now. But when we understand that you've got an exceedingly strong length of stay at 3.6 days for average length of stay for visitors, that's something we think we can leverage to stretch even longer and make that easier on the need for staffing for hotels and that sort of thing. A couple more here. Generational and pandemic influenced shifts in the labor market are an opportunity to capture remote workstays, or as they're often called, digital nomads. And finally, generational shifts mean we need to be thinking more directly about sustainability and about diversity, equity, and inclusion in our tourism planning. So those are the themes I should share with the planning.
Matthew, real quick. One of the generational shifts that we're seeing is that as we're all aging, more and more people are identifying as having some sort of a physical disability. So one of the things we are working on is to identify the areas where we could use improvement on disability accessibility to our trails, to our beaches, to restaurants and shops and things like that. That will help us inform future advocacy projects with our elected officials.
Thanks, Janice. The destination vision was something the planning team set. So this is a group of board and staff members that worked together to create this. It's almost 2 pages long, and I'm not going to read it to you. I'm sure it was in your packet, and I'll let you read it at your leisure. But the big ideas that came out of this brainstorm, you can see all the Post-its there. 6 big ideas: more outdoor recreation opportunities better supported, meaning that there's ways for people to engage in those. You can rent kayaks where you're going to use them, for example. Expanded transportation options, more events, festivals, and family-oriented activities, a better diversity of accommodations, locally owned restaurants sorting local food, and a stronger focus on tribal tourism. So you can see it's a couple of pages long here. This is meant to be somewhat aspirational description of how the destination itself might be in 10, 15 years. Now, we understand the VCB can't create all this on its own. It's going to take a community, it's going to take all the local municipalities, it's going to take the county, it's going to take nonprofits probably in other cases. But this is the dream. This is what we're trying to create. The rest of this plan then will turn towards the organization itself, the VCB's role in creating this vision and what its work is going to be for the next 3 years in service of that longer term vision. So the mission we came to for the VCB today is to inspire visitors and create desire to explore the region. And that's that really traditional destination marketing role, and to contribute to our visitor economy through creative marketing, effective communication, and destination stewardship. So the second half sort of recognizing those other roles that the VCB has to play to support an ongoing robust visitor economy for the county. The values for the organization, and these are really for the staff and the board to think about how they work together and how they interact with their stakeholders. 3 things here, and you'll notice that spells out awe if you look at the first letters. Acceptance, our trust, care, and mutual respect enable us to bring our whole selves to work. Wonder, we never lose sight of the privilege it is to work in this industry and in this place. And engagement, our dedication, ownership, and focus on continuous improvement keeps our eyes on the prize. Right, so those items constitute the North Star for the VCB. Here's who we are and where we're headed. The rest of this plan, then, this is the action stuff. There are 5 buckets of work here for the next 3 years. The first 4 are really about the destination, and the 5th is about the organization. I'll go through each one real briefly rather than reading them here. So you'll see that each of these is structured with some measurable indicators and a set of strategies that support the ongoing work. So for objective one, we're looking to drive visitation and length of stay. And so we're looking to measure the length of stay is growing and we've got more visitors coming year over year. And this is going to happen with community partnerships, some more hotel partner packages and promotions, a cultural asset passport program, where all the cultural activities in the region would be supported with a sort of single ticket program supported by the BCB. Marketing efforts on high return verticals such as running is an example with the history of Steve Prefontaine, and developing remote work and play promotions for those digital nomads. Second objective is about community education and engagement. And so we're going to look for higher scores on both the stakeholder survey and the visitor survey. And also we're going to institute a Tourism Week luncheon that happens during National Travel and Tourism Week in May to share information with stakeholders and talk about the successes of the VCP. Deepening engagement with local businesses, customer service curriculum for tourism businesses to support better frontline interaction with visitors, partnering with the Chamber of Commerce, and instituting a regular newsletter.
And I will ask that you all put May 10th on your agenda or on your calendar. That is a regular chamber luncheon, but the VCB is taking that one over. Travel and Tourism Week is a national identified week put in place by Governor Reagan back in the 80s. And it is the first full week of May. So May 10th is the luncheon we will have at the Mill Casino. And we are anticipating or expecting, we have invited and he has accepted Todd Davidson, who is the head of Travel Oregon, which is the statewide travel and tourism entity, will be our main speaker. So, okay, Matthew.
May 10th. Objective 3, nurture and promote a sustainable, diverse, and welcoming communities. This speaks to that need to be more intentional about sustainability and DEI. So we're going to want to see visitors start to perceive us that way in our indicators. And then in our strategies, we'll start this visitor survey so we can measure these things. We'll make sure the VCB is showing up at the table for some of these local conversations. Sustainable tourism section for the website, and the creation of a DEI plan for the local industry. Our fourth objective, advocate for asset and infrastructure improvements. So scores here are looking at actual changes in the infrastructure and that the visitors score it a little better on their survey. The strategies here, identifying gaps and advocating for strategies to address them, understanding the VCB doesn't control this stuff, but can be an advocate for these things and how important they are. Asset map for adventure equipment rentals, including for folks with disabilities, as Janice referenced earlier, that's a growing group. And advocating to expand the geography and quality of broadband access, specifically in the state parks, which I understand is quite a dead spot. And the final one, supporting the organization to support all these other strategies, building the organizational capacity. We're going to look at replenishing our volunteer headcount, growth in the open rate on stakeholder emails, and a general satisfaction score from stakeholders. And we'll do that through hiring some PR contractors to deepen our bench and do some of that extra work, skills and capabilities gap assessment for the team, professional development plan to support that, and enhanced volunteer recruitment. It's a lot of work for Janice and her team for the next 3 years, but we did narrow it down to what we thought was realistic and achievable.
So when I started in this role in 2017, it was me. I was the Visitor and Convention Bureau. And since then, we have added 2 full-time staff, and we have a cadre of about 21 volunteers that help run the Coos Bay Visitor Information Center. There are other volunteers that help run the North Bend Visitor Information Center and the Charleston one. Volunteers are the lifeblood of our industry, and so we're always looking for more. If there's anybody in the audience who would like to join us in helping to promote our area.
I noticed they all raised their hands.
I did notice that. But we can always use more ambassadors to our area. Coos County is one of the most beautiful places on earth. Every time I post pictures, friends and family from far and wide comment that I have found heaven on earth. And I couldn't agree more. And while we don't want to become a north or central coast overrun by too many visitors, we certainly have room to expand our visitor economy. I'm open for questions if there are any.
Janice, I noticed that you have the esteemed city manager who's been Roger Craddock here. Does he have anything to add?
Well, certainly, the city of Coos Bay and its other partners all work together to build this section of our economy. Coos County needs to diversify its economy. While we were once a resource-rich economy, that's of the past, and we need to figure out how to bring other revenues into our area. And tourism is certainly one of them, as was shared. I mean, just in 2019, more than $250 million came to this county because of tourism. And investing in promoting and expanding the appeal to other groups will be important for our future.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Roger.
Anybody have any questions for Janice or Roger?
I have a comment I'd like to make.
Yeah,
Can I
go on.
do that?
Yeah.
Thank you first to the three of you for this great presentation. Nicely done. And we have some assets here in the county, and I don't know that we have targeted as a county government, tourism, or what we might do more of or better. And I welcome an opportunity to perhaps have a work session amongst people from your group and the commissioners.
Yes,
and
we would.
Perhaps our parks department, and roads and forestry that control some of our natural assets.
I would agree to that. And in fact, we do work pretty closely with Lance and the forest with our Whiskey Run
Would you tell us
mountain
how to do
biking
that?
trail.
How to work closely with Lance.
Well, I'll say Julie Miller, who runs the Travel Southern Oregon Coast organization, works much more closely with Lance than I do. But we are, as that separate entity, the Coos County Tourism Work Group, now known as the Travel Southern Oregon Coast, does work diligently to help promote the whole area, and we are always open to sitting down and discussing other ways, other opportunities. Things like, Whiskey Run came out of a discussion similar to this, and it is now one of the top-rated mountain biking trails on the West Coast, and we should all be proud of that and how well that's done. So,
Don't let us forget this invitation. I really think it's important that we communicate more.
Would love to.
I've got a comment.
Yeah, Rob?
Yeah, I've got two questions for you. My first question, are you aware of the DEQ trying to basically shut down our commercial fishing industry through forcing new regulations that would make the wastewater off their boats have to be cleaner than our own drinking water? That's one. And then the second part of that first question is, do you also know that they're trying to shut down our forests to all human activity, and this is state forest? And are you, as a group, doing anything about it? Are you contacting your legislatures? Are you contacting the DEQ to try to stop them from destroying our rural industries? And that's fishing and that's forestry, of those two industries.
As an industry, I don't know that we have come out with a position on either of those. We are watching them closely. We certainly don't want activity in the forest to no longer be accessible to recreation. As long as we are being good stewards of those forests and good stewards of our beaches and good stewards of our waterways for future generations. So we haven't actually come to conclusions on those.
I would highly recommend that you do come to a conclusion and that you help the rest of us, because if you get rid of all of the people who live here and they don't allow access to the ocean or the forest, your tourist industry is dead in the water. And so I'd highly recommend you get involved with that. My second question is that Matthew mentioned tribal involvement or tribal tourism. Is the tribe putting any money financially towards this endeavor?
Yes, sir. They are the fourth leg of our stool. The Coquel Indian Tribe is one of the only tribal governments that participates with a VCB in this way.
All right, that is wonderful to hear. And my comment is on the diversity, equity, inclusion. In the North Bend School District, they're fighting because we've got board members on there who know that diversity, equity, inclusion sounds good, but in fact, it is actual racism itself, because it, instead of treating people equally as individual, it groups people based on their color and on their sexuality. Now, the North Bend School District has taken that language out of a lot of their documents, whereas the city of Coos Bay is practicing diversity, equity, and inclusion, and Roger can identify this. He is discriminating against the Christian people by only hanging a pride flag and not allowing a Christian flag to hang, when we should be supporting all groups equally, or we should only be supporting none. But that's why what I would recommend, and I don't need a response to it, but I'm just saying we need to get diversity, equity, inclusion out of this garbage, because the more I hear about it, the less I want to participate with your group. And I can guarantee you there are plenty of people in that room who just heard that word, that term, diversity, equity, inclusion, and they know it's racism, they know it's discrimination, and they don't want to have anything to do with any organization who's practicing that garbage. That's my comment, and thank you.
I'd just like to add or circle back to Rob's comment regarding the DEQ mandates on the fisheries industry. And that is going to actually take a serious toll on tourism, because that's going to affect the availability of local seafood, which is a specifically stated objective of, yeah. And so as a member of the Board of Commissioners here, as well as a member of the TSOC board, I certainly will be advocating for us taking a position in opposition to those DEQ regulations, and I hope that we can get there as a group.
And that takes more than as an individual to be able to do that. So I think we can come to consensus on some of these issues.
Yeah.
OCFA, the Oregon Coast Visitors Association, has instituted an entire program about keeping local seafood local. So I know that it is important to all of the coast to ensure that our fisheries are healthy.
The more unified our voice in opposition to these outrageous regulations, the more effective will be our oppositions.
If you don't know, the Pacific Seafoods out there in Charleston uses Coos Bay North Bend Water Board water, which we all have drank over the years. When they use it to process their seafood, the DEQ wants all of the chlorine and stuff removed from the water before it goes back in the bay. Even though when you flush lines for fire departments, with the fire, all that water goes to the bay anyway. They're not opposing that, I don't know, in the sewer treatment plants. You have to remove all the chlorine too there. Yeah, yeah. Which is somewhat ridiculous, because we're all drinking this water. Huh?
And not only that,
it doesn't make any sense at all.
Mr. Chair, I would also point out that the technology to remove or to render the water in accordance with those new DEQ regulations does not even exist. It's not available. Nobody knows how to do it. So it's going to kill our fisheries industry. Kill it.
Yep. And they just thought it was a simple matter of just applying something and making it happen.
We're wandering here.
I know.
I'd like to be done before dinner. We're gonna miss lunch as it is.
Anybody else want to make comment about the presentation? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you, Jen.
Moving on to 3B, request approval of IGA 179188 with OHA, in other words, Oregon Health Authority, and authorized chair to sign Chiefs Health and Wellness. Anthony.
Good morning. We're going to get approval for IGA 179188. Public Health Department has participated in
medicated administrative claiming since its inception in Oregon. This is a way through 16 surveys a year to capture funds to pay for administrative functions associated with OHP covered services. This is a federal program that requires a match to be paid, as well as expenses paid to Multnomah Education Service District, the website host for the project. Public Health Department netted $43,562 last fiscal year. These funds help cover administrative expenses like front desk, help, and accounting costs. And if there's any questions, we've got Rebecca online.
Okay, so I have a motion.
I move to approve IGA Amendment 179188-0 with the Oregon Health Authority and authorize the chair to sign.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Item 3C, request approval to expand mobile response team. David.
Morning, you all.
Morning, David.
Morning, David.
Yeah, this is a request to hire 3 additional crisis staff for our mobile crisis team, and also there's a crisis youth position also. These are new positions that we have already received funding for. We received some funding from the state general fund starting January 1st, and their advanced health contract also was increased to cover some of these costs. The state has instituted new requirements around mobile response, including that all responses would happen within a two-party response team. And they've also added a requirement for more services for youth stabilization. And so these 3 positions would address those needs. These positions are already in our next budget proposal for 23-24. But this request is to get approval to do those positions prior to the start of the new fiscal year based on these new requirements.
David, could you give us some examples of the services provided both to the general public and to the youth under this program?
So we've been operating our mental health mobile crisis response for about 3 years. We average about 100 contacts per month in a crisis. Many of these are done in association with law enforcement. So, we get somebody that's having some kind of mental health crisis. Sometimes it comes through 911, and then they call our mobile response team and they go out together. And then sometimes they operate alone if there's no safety considerations. We also do a lot of content. About a third of our contacts are for youth family crisis. We get a lot of calls from family where they have a teenager that's out of control or threatening to harm themselves. And so that's a part of our response. And it's been highly successful. Law enforcement has been very appreciative of our efforts to go out. They don't want to be the ones dealing with some of the mental health considerations, so they're glad to have us take the lead. And that's only going to be strengthening here over this next review period. And we'll have a better response for youth as well. So right now we deal with the immediate situation, which is about 72 hours. This additional positions and programs will allow us to serve people for up to 2 months. A lot of times, we got to deal with a crisis and then it flares up in the next hour or day or week. So this gives us a little bit more time period to make sure that families and youth are doing better over the long term.
Okay, do you have a motion?
Yeah, move to approve the expansion of mobile responsive crisis stabilization program with 3 additional positions to meet contractual requirements and approve the posting filling of the positions.
Second?
Second that.
Okay, any other discussion about this? Anybody? Yes, William?
I wasn't even thinking about bringing this up. My name is William. I'm from Rural Point. I'm familiar with the response team. I was just wanting some questions about it because some of the things they told me that day when they came to visit my brother didn't seem to help the situation much. And what it was he was beginning to hear voices and getting schizophrenic. In that process, I was trying to take care of him and keep him safe at my house. And he began to get violent eventually and attacked my other brother. And then I figured out later, after the fact, that he threw some boards through my RV and broke some windows. I thought this was some random thing, but it turns out I don't think it was. And then he actually got some paint in my garage and tagged it around my whole house, red paint. And just spilled a lot of words around the whole thing. It looked like Amityville Nightmare or something like that. But the point was, your people came out and they told me they really couldn't do nothing for him unless he was willing to kill himself that day. Now, so he got no help that day. And see, well, he was in a weird situation. And being too dangerous to be at my house, because I didn't know what he might do next. I put him in a tent with my other brother over at Sturgeon Park, because they said they were going to try to get him some help. So the process took almost 2 weeks before they even got an appointment, where I was trying to get him on some medicine so he wouldn't hear voices. So what happened is right in the middle of that, just one day before he was supposed to go in, as he was waiting to get some help, because he was willing to try, he just got up and walked away. And now it's been 3 months, I have not heard or seen him. I have no idea where he's at. I contacted the food stamp office to find out if he even used his food stamps. He hasn't used even his food stamps. So I have no idea if he's alive or dead and where he went. And it's really bothered the whole family. And we have the police looking for him, no one's seen him. And so I would like to see if you're going to have that type of program, people come out, that somehow you make it so people in that situation can get quicker help, so they can actually prevent those kind of things, or someone committing suicide. Because they asked him, they said, hey, are you suicidal? And he said no, and they asked him, well, have you been? He said yes, and I know he has thought that. He's told me himself. So it's kind of like those crimes where you wait for it to happen, and then it's already taken place. So I was hoping that maybe by me making this statement up here, that somehow you can get some more advanced, quicker response for somebody in this kind of a situation. Because I'm sure my brother's not the only one that slipped through. And I don't know if he committed suicide, he's out in the forest somewhere, or what happened to him. And it's kind of a bother to us. But what I'd like to see not to happen to another person is basically why I'm coming up here. I'd like to see somehow that when a person has done something as crazy as that, why wait for them to start a house on fire and kill people? When you can actually put them someplace where they can be evaluated really quickly because they're willing to go. Instead of setting rules that, well, unless he really killed himself today and he said he's going to, we can't pick him up. So I think there needs to be some quirking on some of those rules and how you help people. Because I've been out in the streets a lot working with poor and people like that. You never know when they're going to trip, but if they're willing to get help, it should be a little quicker than weeks down the road. So that's my comment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lou. And I'm aware of a similar story. Somebody who called me and related that their relative was going to commit suicide, a young man. And when they called, it was, well, we can't come out because there might be firearms in the building. And they said they could bring them in. Well, they don't have any openings until X weeks down the road. I don't know exactly when, but it was quite a while. And this person was threatening suicide at the moment. And so you would think that they would respond and say, get that person in here so we can help them. But that wasn't the case. So I would really encourage you to have a different plan than somebody was talking on the phone and saying, well, we can see you in a couple, 3 weeks. Well, that's not now when the person's having those issues. Yep. Anybody else?
This motion, just real quick, this listening is, I'd almost be thinking that rather than hitting people at this point in time, it'll be something that we think back down the road. But right now, it sounds like the system needs to be fixed. It sounds like it's not working properly, or it's not doing its job. I don't know if it's a situation where training, education, whatever, but it just seems like it's not working and regularly flowing. There are people in the system and have a bigger system that's not quite working. That the system gets fine-tuned, find out what needs to be taken care of, and then once that's figured out, then maybe bring in some people to add to that because they're going to hold stronger response.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. And one comment I would make in response to that is is that one of the challenges that all county agencies that interface with the public face is a lack of staffing. And I would suspect, and David can confirm this true or not, that those limitations that the challenges you're speaking of, the limitations that William spoke of, are largely due to inadequate staffing, and that this actually is intended to address that. Am I correct, David?
That is part of it, yes. Yes. If I could answer a little bit some of the other comments, if that would be helpful. I think there are two aspects here, and I completely want to acknowledge the speaker's concerns. I would say that my staff would share identical concerns, honestly. There are two aspects. One is certainly the lack of providers to do the work, especially for psychiatric medication services. We do not have adequate numbers of providers in the area. They're extremely hard to recruit. And so the delay between somebody needing help and our ability to get them help is a problem. The other part, though, that one of the speakers was talking about is also true, which is our ability to intervene is really confined by current law around civil liberties, around civil commitment. And so we're often in a position of watching a slow-moving car wreck with an inability to intervene until it actually occurs, until the bad event happens, and only then are we often able to intervene. And it is heartbreaking to hear people's stories when we are confined by current law and statutes around this. And so yes, we end up sometimes not being able to intervene in areas where we would love to be able to act more quickly than we are able to. So I think there's really two things. One is really our legal constraints, which are designed to protect people's liberties in these situations, even when it appears to their detriment. And also the lack of certain key staff and providers in our area when somebody's wanting help to be able to strike when the iron is hot. So I think it's kind of both of those two things.
I also know that this subject came up some months ago about MRT. And I had a discussion with local law enforcement and sheriff's office, and they really appreciate the MRT teams because they're not really trained in mental issues for folks. So when they have a situation, they call it MRT team, and they can respond immediately out in the field, and it helps them a lot. I think that's correct, Sheriff.
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm. Here comes Sheriff Dave.
Sheriff, for you, I will say, just for devil's advocate, anytime we have called, they've come out, they've been available 24/7, and we do really appreciate the assistance on scene.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Thank you, David.
3D, request approval of second contract amendment with West Coast Contractors.
Morning, Paul.
Paul Slater, Public Works Director. So there were some unexpected subsurface conditions out there on this retaining wall repair in the middle 5 anchors. That's been redesigned by the engineer at a steeper angle, which requires some changes to the anchors on the existing wall, which necessitates this additional work for $108,533.
So, motion?
I move approving the additional compensation of $108,533 to be spent using ARP funds, and signed a second contract amendment with West Coast Contractors.
Second. Discussion?
For those who wonder what this is about, the county has a natural gas pipeline. It runs in part along the railroad track, the old railroad bed between here and Myrtle Point, which in turn runs often right along the river. The river eroded away part of that railroad bed and threatened the safety of the pipe, so we had to put in some sheet piling and tie them back in order to preserve the railroad bed and the pipeline, which is really an important ingredient to a lot of the jobs we have here in the county and some of the homes. good number.
Okay. Any comments? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, 3E, request approval to purchase used semi-bottom
Belly.
dump trailer. It says bump trailer, but
Yeah, it's a belly dump.
bit of it.
So in July, the board had approved us to purchase 2004 used dump trailer. The seller of that is a local business. They decided to keep that trailer, so we were unable to purchase it. We have now found another trailer that would suit the purpose we're looking for $38,000, and that's again from a local company. We did get 3 other quotes of comparable trailers. They ranged from $34,000 up to $70,000. They're all used. Well, one of them is new, the other 2 were used. So this is a good purchase for what we need. It's also a little bit shorter belly dump, which will allow us, a lot of our county roads are tight. We don't have a lot of room. So a shorter trailer makes it more usable for us. So just request the board approve the purchase for $38,000 from Wyatt Timber.
Entertain a motion?
I move approval of purchasing a used 2021 Ranco LW21-32 semi-bottom dump trailer for $38,000 from Wyatt Timber LLC.
Second.
Okay. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Moving on to 3F, request approval to purchase above-ground diesel storage tank.
So we're requesting to pull that item from the agenda today. We did receive a 4th quote that was late, or just later than we thought we'd get it for the board meeting. So we'd like to evaluate that. It looks like it might actually be the lowest price. May end up being the one we select. We'd like to evaluate that and bring it back to the board at a later date. Probably next meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah, we pulled it. 3G, request approval to transfer funds to fleet services.
So September 27th of last year, the board approved us doing the repairs or completing the repairs to this John Deere dozer that we have. It was also transferred from solid waste to the road department. We've since done those repairs. We just need to transfer the money from one of our accounts to another one just to shore up our budget.
I move we approve and sign resolution 23-03061B, transferring $30,000 from Capital Projects Division to Fleet Services Division of the Road Department.
Second.
Okay, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
3H, request approval of low quote for paving at Land Ranch Parks.
Morning, Craig.
Morning, Commissioners. Craig Storm, Peace County Parks. Okay, we have a grant here that, let me get my paper clip out of the way. We've been awarded an ATV grant number ATV-22-05LG22-038 from the Oregon Parks and Recreations for the D-Loop paving project at Riley Ranch for the amount of $94,832. 73.2 of that is funded by the ORPA, and the county parks is funding the 26.78% of the match.
Okay.
We would like to approve Knife River for the project.
I move we approve the low quote from Knife River in the amount of $94,425 and approve spending authority for the Riley Park D-Loop paving project.
Second.
Any discussion about this?
There's quite a disparity between those 2 quotes. Any explanation for that?
Well, the biggest thing is Knife River. They're the ones that make the asphalt. And they can get it for a tremendously cheaper price than other vendors that are buying it from them. So they were able to produce the per tonnage much less than the other company. And Johnson Rock wanted to do a few other things to it that weren't part of the grant, with leveling and doing a bunch of other grading and so forth that was costing much more of their prep for the paving.
Okay.
Well, it's a shame because certainly, personally, my preference would always be to see business like this going to a locally held company rather than one that's not.
Yeah.
And, no, all due respect to Knife River's local contingent, but the money does not stay here. Anyway, but that's too much disparity to weather, isn't it?
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thanks, Craig.
3I, request approval to transfer funds to purchase a tractor for Cint. Cint is going to farm?
Yes, sir. No, sir.
Gotta plow that stuff under.
No, I think you guys know that I have a pretty large emphasis on trying to combat drugs in Coos County. I think it's one of our bigger problems. And while marijuana never really was one of my intents, since we exist largely through grants and forfeitures, one of the bigger grants we got was marijuana eradication for illegal grows. And there are a lot of issues that come with marijuana, illegal grows as well, such as chemicals in the ground and water usage. So one of the recent, and I was a little surprised to hear this, one of the recent best and most accepted practices for marijuana grows when we're eradicating these plants, instead of taking them, hauling them somewhere, burning them, burying them at the county dump as used to be done. What they're doing now is actually taking a tractor to the grow and burying it on site. It destroys the plants pretty quick. So this is the current practice that's going on. And in this case, this is a request to use, to move $14,566 into Fund 421.60.01 in order to make the purchase. We did get 2 quotes from the manufacturers, the main distributors for the area. And the cheaper one was $24,521 to purchase the Bobcat, while also to grant me the signatory authority so we can continue working in Cint.
Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I'll move to approve resolution 23-03062B and authorize purchase of Bobcat while granting Sheriff Gabe Fabricio signing authority in this matter and accepting quote 3837E038937 as the awarded quote.
Second.
Discussion.
Sheriff, does the Bobcat come with is it like a rototiller, or what's the procedure?
No, it's actually, it'll have a bucket on it for digging up ground. So you dig the ground up, throw the plants in, and put the earth back over it. Apparently, and I don't know the science behind it, but apparently it decomposes so fast that it heats up and destroys the plants really quickly.
Okay. So what's the total purchase price of this thing?
Total purchase price was $24,521.
Yeah, because we don't have that part.
Oh.
I didn't get included?
No, it's just the amount moved.
Oh, copy.
So I was wondering, is this a used one or what this one?
No, sir, it's a new one.
Okay, so it's 24,000 and change, another 10 grand on top,
24,521, yes.
out of your budget.
Out of the grant.
Out of the grant, okay.
This is using grant. The grant was
All
already
right.
awarded. So.
All right.
This is
Any other
discussion? Yes, discussion?
Aye.
Discussion?
What?
I think we got one on.
Rob Taylor? Is that you?
Yeah, I've got a question for the sheriff. I was just curious, is marijuana eradication the only thing you're going to use this tractor for?
Right now, there's talk about, we don't have a place for it, but there's talk about using it to get our own range going. We've been talking with BLM about some lands that we've had before that will need some work. Anything else that comes up that we need it for, but don't really have anything planned right now.
All right, that's good. And by the way, it's so much better to till the marijuana underground than it is to burn it, because marijuana actually helps the other plants. It's what they call a rotation crop that can be used to supplement other crops. So I do think that if you're going to eradicate marijuana, this is a much more sophisticated way of doing that.
Copy, thank you.
Any other discussion about the tractor? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, moving on to 3J, request adoption of 2023 Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan.
Yes, sir. So we've been working on this for about over 2 years with DLCD. That's the Federal Department of Land Conservation and Development. It's 800 and something page document that tries to address any natural hazard that can come up and what to do about it. So we're requesting that the board approve the document and sign, please.
Motion?
I move we approve resolution 23030636, authorizing and authorize the chair to sign.
Okay. I don't know if that's a C or an L.
L,
That's an
okay.
L.
All right.
You modify your motion to include that?
Yes, I do.
Okay, have a second on that?
Second?
All right, any other discussion?
Thanks for getting
None,
this done.
all in favor?
Aye.
All right, 3K, request approval to reuse equipment for radio upgrades. Reuse?
Reuse, yes, sir. Almost all the radio upgrades we have are new. However, by reusing one of its combiner filter for Elk Mountain, which was always planned to be a phase 2 radio upgrade, it'll take care of the eastern portion of the county. We can reuse one that was taken off of 4 miles since we're no longer on that site, but we do have to have some work done to it. We have to send it back to the company and requesting approval expenditure for the rework the combiners in the amount of $12,473 for Elk Mountain build, and authorize myself to sign. If we bought it new, it would be closer to $90,000.
Move to,
Not a bad deal.
no. Move to approve expenditure for the rework of combiners in the amount of $12,473 for Elk Mountain build, and authorize the sheriff to sign.
You second?
I second that.
Discussion?
I will note that this will come from the emergency radio system levy.
Yes,
that was passed a few years ago.
Yes,
Not from general.
correct. Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
3L, request approval to hire Jeff Lee at step 6.
So this is the first time I've done a step 6. I don't have the agenda in front of me, but that's okay. Jeff Lee is actually a captain in Idaho. He is in charge of drug task force himself, search and rescue. He's the equivalent of Captain Sean Sanborn from the division commander here. His daughter has moved to the area. He's interested in becoming a deputy with us. And he makes considerably more as a step 6 captain over there. Bringing him at step 6 deputy here would be a loss of about $750 a month for him. But he really wants to move here. And with the experience, training, and knowledge he has, it'll be a huge bonus to be able to plug somebody into patrol, give them a car, show them the area, and we won't have to go to the academy or anything. So very excited. I'm hoping to bring him in at step 6 to try to mitigate some of that loss and hire him on board. We don't have a start date yet. This is so I can tell him, yes, we were able to do this. He's trying to buy a house, so he needs that as far as being able to plan for that house and show the mortgage company.
Okay. The motion?
I move to approve the hire of Jeff Lee at step 6 of pay grade 506.
Second?
Okay, discussion?
Grab it. Quick.
Yep.
Yes,
Any-
absolutely.
No? Okay. I thought Megan was gonna have a comment, but apparently not. Oh, okay. All in favor?
Thanks,
Aye.
Sheriff.
Aye.
Awesome.
Aye, John?
Aye.
Sheriff.
Thank you, Commissioners.
All right, Katie. 3M, request authorization to move forward with tax statement contracting. Megan Sims, treasurer, tax collector, finance director, budget officer. Anything else we can tackle? Master of accounting too, yes.
Morning, Megan.
So we talked about this a little bit in our budget work sessions, and over the past 3 years, we have had the state print our property tax statements and mail them out, and they have made errors every year. And so we are looking at moving to a company called Master's Touch. The per piece may be a little bit more expensive, but they will automatically combine statements and envelopes if the names and addresses match exactly. They will automatically do that for us, and so that will dramatically cut down on postage to make up for the extra per piece cost and hopefully an overall savings.
We had a comment about that about a while ago, about a year ago.
And we were doing it manually, but I mean, we're humans, so we can't catch them all ever.
Maybe that would clear up that comment. hopefully.
I'm certain that it will.
You ready? So, motion.
Do you want permission to actually engage them or just to continue talking to them?
I want approval to move forward with contracting with them, and then we will get a contract through council's office. But if you authorize me to sign that with council's approval.
Move to approve the treasurer to move forward with contracting for Master's Touch for printing, inserting, and mailing tax statements.
Second.
Okay, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, all right.
Thank you.
3N, request approval to purchase fire alarm system utilizing ARP funds, Kyla, for maintenance.
Good morning.
Good morning, Kyle.
So I am requesting ARP funding so that we can contract with CNS Fire to replace the fire alarm system that is currently in the courthouse. So the backstory of this, we've been having a lot of issues with the current fire panel that we have in the courthouse. It's been triggering an alarm. We had CNS come in, do a diagnostics to figure out which bell was triggering the alarm that was triggering dispatch, because that's who currently monitors our fire alarm system. In this process, we found that the current system is actually several systems spliced together. It is not fully functional. In order for us to have CNS monitor our fire alarm system, which is the same company that we contracted with the juvenile building, we need to have some upgrades done in order to make this a functional fire alarm system. Right now, there are some things communicating together, but there are some alarm bells that are not communicating. So we're kind of a mess. So I'm looking and hoping that you guys will approve the use of ARP funding for this, and then we can contract with them to have the work done.
I'll move approval for purposes of discussion.
All right, got a second on that?
Second.
I have real concerns about using our ARP fund.
Yeah.
Is there any other source? I mean, even if it ran your maintenance budget short, could we squeeze the money out of that?
I might have enough under our major R&I. I'm gonna have to move some money. So right now, we accepted an IGA contract with the state of Oregon for the state courts for $25,000 for the remodel. We were gonna use that money to do the remodel, but I can do an agenda to request to have that $25,000 moved into my line items, which would open up a little bit of money for me. I think enough to do the fire alarm system.
And if you run short, come back to us. But we're facing a very large budget deficit this year. And I don't see any way that we can find all the money required to fill that deficit out of tax dollars.
Okay.
And so we may have to, I just want to keep the option of having these funds available, open to us.
Okay.
It's not a good fix, but it may be the only one we have.
Yeah.
Other than shutting down part of the county, and I don't know what part that would be. I'm just throwing a warning out there.
Yeah, no.
Treasurer probably shooting it.
I do get that, and like I said, I know we need to get this fire alarm system up and going. And short of getting this, I mean, I don't know. According to CNS Fire, when they went through this, and we have had other companies come through prior to them, and they were supposed to kind of give us a quote to get everything lined up, and they ghosted us. They never contacted us back. So
we got to get it done, no question about it. But I approve. I guess we have a motion on the floor. I withdraw that motion. If the second.
Well, I don't know the basis of the withdrawal, but I'll.
He's talking about not using ARP funds, but then trying to find it within their budget.
Okay, so are we tabling for that funding or?
No, I just want to move, I want to move approval of the project, but using existing maintenance funds rather than ARP.
He would want you to withdraw your second, so he can restate the motion.
I'll withdraw.
Okay, then I'll restate the motion to approve the fire alarm system for the courthouse project in an amount not to exceed $25,000 using existing maintenance funds rather than ARP.
Okay.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
So if you don't know, everybody's still here, departments, citizens, we're roughly $3 million short in the budget. Not a fun thing. All righty, moving on to 3.0, request approval IGA for Transportation Growth Management Program, Community Development. What?
Full.
Oh, that's full. Okay, good. Is there not here? 3P, request decision on retro rating plans. Cherry.
Hello. So every year we get notices from SAFE that we can close out current years of retro rating plan evaluation plans. And they are giving us the option of closing 3 separate years. I spoke to Wendy on this, and she does not recommend closing out year 2019, 2020, or 2021 to 2022. Year 2018 to 2019, if you decide to close that year out, the county will get back the $96.44. It would just make it so SAFE would not go back and evaluate that year. Since the county doesn't owe any money, I looked at the claims and I don't foresee any of those claims reopening, but it would be an option for you guys. And unfortunately, we do have to pay the 2021 and 2022 year, which is a total of $162.88.12. And that is due to one large claim that the county had.
How large is that claim?
That claim is it's up over 300,000 right now.
So you have to pay half of it.
So this will close that out. We're at the maximum, so this will only have to pay this amount. And the claim has reached the maximum, so the county won't be responsible for any more of that. But year 2019 and 20, we can use that to offset.
Part of it.
Part of it, yes.
So what does that net out? Well, we can do it here.
Sorry.
Okay, one of them, the offset would be the sum of $96 and $25,000.
No, it would be
Is that right?
32. If we don't close out the year, then it will be $32,060.51.
Okay. So we were roughly 130. Yeah. Okay.
Kind of like buying an insurance policy and paying $130 to eliminate a $300,000, $130,000 to eliminate a $300,000 risk.
Yes. Well, we'd have to pay it anyways, but we don't recommend closing out that year because we're already paying the maximum amount. And And we want them to continue to evaluate that year, because if they have overestimated anything, then they will continue to evaluate it, and the county may get some of that money
Right.
back.
I got you. All right.
We get a refund if they overvalue it.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. All right, so I have a motion.
Move to approve foreclosure and sign documents applying for years 2018 and 2019 and apply the credit to the remaining balance. I think I've got that right. Do I have that right?
Yes.
Okay. So
Of
that's
the
my
21,
motion.
22.
Yeah.
Second.
Okay, second? Okay. Any discussion about this? Total confusion. It has to do with state accident industrial fund and our countywide insurance. And we have a bill outstanding, but we have some credits. That's what we're working on. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. That motion for consent
That
calendar.
I move approval.
Paying out of the general fund, we were gonna pay it out of settlements.
Oh,
I didn't.
okay.
Didn't
Here.
specify. So do we need a new motion then to pay this out of settlements?
In case we do, I amend my motion to pay out of settlements.
Okay, second on the
And
amendment?
I second that.
All right, then. All in favor of that?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Now, motion
Thanks,
to.
Joe.
I move that we approve the consent calendar.
Okay.
Second?
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We don't have any late agenda items. I have one late agenda item, so I need approval to even hear a late agenda item.
What's it pertain to?
For the sheriff's office,
I move
transfer
approval.
funds.
Move approval of the late agenda item.
Second?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So the late agenda item is to transfer funds from items 1605 and 1606 to cover overtime due to staffing levels in dispatch. Sure.
I think you just covered it, Commissioner.
That was the issue.
Our overtime, we are about half staff.
In the amount of 38,000.
Yes, sir. And that should cover us through the end of the year, based on projections. I am
Oh,
swearing in
20
a lateral dispatcher tomorrow, so just want to throw that out there because I'm excited about it. So
Okay.
she's already trained and certified.
There was two line items. One, 1605 is 38,000. Line item 1606 is 23,000 to transfer.
Yes, sir. I think it's 1605 to 1606 from my understanding. Oh, no, I'm sorry. To cover open.
Yeah,
I'm
they're
sorry.
separate items.
Yes, sir. One's piece out, one's dispatch. I apologize.
Uh-huh. So a motion to do that to cover the staffing levels of dispatch
move approval.
overtime, basically.
Second?
Okay. So for discussion, this is overtime payment for the lack of personnel we have in dispatch, and the people that are there putting a lot of overtime.
They are putting in a lot of
Okay.
overtime. Yes, sir.
All right. Any discussion on that one?
Yeah. How does this overtime correlate to the overtime funds that we just moved for the purchase of the Bobcat, Sheriff?
Those were grant funds for the Bobcat. Were actually were for SAM.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah.
different division and different funds.
All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other discussion about this? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Commission reports, anybody got the report?
What?
Well,
deep subject.
Yeah, we have continuing issues, as Chair Main stated, the budget is short I think it's $3.2 million. And, you know, it's deeply concerning when we see this happening continually with the shortage of funds coming from trust lands, the forest revenues that we're supposed to be receiving. And so we continue to burn up our ARP funds, which are now down in the $6 million range, and we've just authorized spending more of that today. So, you know, there's not enough there to even do this for 2 years. If we end up having to use ARP funds to balance the budget, it's very concerning to me on the ensuing year. You know, what are we going to do? We're obviously prices on everything is going up. Personnel is becoming more expensive. So there's no reason to anticipate next year's budget having less of a shortfall than this year. In fact, it's probably going to be more. And we're going to have less than half of those ARP funds remaining because obviously, as we can see here today, there are other expenses that come up through the year that we're always looking for ways to fund, and that's going to chew away on those ARP funds yet more. So I say this not because I know what the answer is, but because it's something that is deeply concerning that we all need to really be aware of. And so that's what's really weighing on my heart. As far as what we've been working on, I've been continuing to get up to speed, drinking from the fire hose, getting accustomed to everything that is entailed here, and seeing more and more of those challenges. And I am looking forward to going back to Association of Oregon Counties County College next month. None of that this month, but anyway, that's really what's on my heart.
I'd like to continue with some of my conversations with all of you regarding the county finances. I think that's very helpful for all of us to understand where we are and what we've tried to do to not get here ever. But we apparently have not been able to accomplish that. We know, and you know from past discussions, that our operating county tax rate of $1.08 per $1,000 of assessed value is about 1/3, just a little bit over 1/3 of what the average county in the state assesses its citizens for running their county. Our total budget is over $130 million, and the citizens directly pay $6 million of that. So it's a pretty good bargain any way you put it. Not all of you will use all of the county's resources, but they touch almost every one of us. We have worked really hard in the last 10 years to find revenues that are not tax-based. And we've had some successes. I'd like to go back and talk about those. One of them was we instituted a safety program that saved us, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but there's been years with about $500,000 savings in insurance premiums. I thought that was a success. The biggest success we probably had was one that was volunteered to the county by Bandon Dunes, and they unilaterally agreed to add a 6% public safety surcharge to their room bills. That has generated at first about $700,000 to help with public safety. Over time, their room availability and room rates have gone up to, Megan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's over $1 million now a year that we get from Bandon Dunes to fund the jail. In addition to, and other public safety operations. In addition to that, there's another $300,000 or $400,000 a year that they pay us to pay into a tourism promotion fund, and it is not advertising. It's for hard an example of it, we created with grant money a 30-mile bike trail, mountain bike trail through our county forest. The usage became so good that it was evident we needed a restroom facility out there. We called Bandon Dunes up and they said, go buy it. It was $60,000. And so they fund that type of thing out of the other part. But the basic thing that helps the county, the biggest help, is funding our public safety. We have some departments, such as Coos Health and Wellness, such as Community Corrections, the Road Department, that are paid fully for by state or federal funds. The state expects us to use their money to offer those programs to all the citizens of this county. We had been charging those programs, the personnel costs that we incurred and the equipment costs that we had incurred, but we had not been charging them for such things as personnel services, legal services, bookkeeping, accounting, payroll services. And so we found that those were legitimate charges that we could make to these, to the federal and state government. And they totaled around $400,000 a year, as I recall. I don't know if they're still at that level. That was a while back. So those are significant things that's another significant thing we've done to enhance our dependency or enhance our dollars that we get and not having to turn to tax increases. We also were able to change our operations both at solid waste and at parks. Both of those departments used to draw on the general fund, and now they are self-supporting. And in addition to that, they are also paying these overhead charges to the county. So those swings were amounted, off the top of my head, for maybe $400,000 a year losses to that much of a surplus. We worked really hard as a county and as commissioners to avoid raising our taxes. And we're going to continue to do that. But I'm not so sure that we're not out of bullets, and that our consequences of that will be either to curtail significantly some county services, and I don't know what they'd be, I have no idea, or find additional money. And we're trying everything we can to not make that additional money tax money, but just a warning, I'm not sure where we go without tapping more tax dollars, and no one wants that. But I assure you that we take our job seriously. I think we've done a great job at protecting a very, very low county operating tax rate, leaving dollars in our citizens' pockets, but we may not be able to do that forever. So that's my bad news and my reality for the day.
All right. I wrote a letter in support of keeping Scott Starkey as on the board of the Oregon Hatchery Research Center. He is the board chair, but his term is expiring, but his chairmanship is not, which is kind of weird. But so I wrote a letter to the state asking that he continue on the board of the Oregon Hatchery Resource Center. I wrote a letter to the Board of Forestry explaining why it wasn't a good idea to have 55% of all the county trust lands converted over to an HCP, Habitat Conservation Plan, which is basically a lockup of that lands, and there's 700,000 acres. We have over 7,000 acres in Coos County. So they would take 55% of that and lock it up forever. Why that was not a good idea when we're struggling to even make ends meet with even our general fund departments. And who knows where that'll go, but most counties wrote letters in opposition to this HCP. I've been struggling the last couple of weeks with the county health department or mental health department having a contract with Youth Era, or Drop as it's called in North Bend. It's supposed to be helping at-risk youth. We only funded it for the first 3 months of the year because of things that came to light that county health department and youth there were supporting, like drag queens in the park, genderbread, transgender for youth on a camp out, ages 13 to 17, et cetera, et cetera. So when I mentioned this to somebody who works with them from Grants Pass, I said, how come they are supporting Black Lives Matter? It seems like it will separate various groups in the United States as well as here. It's in promotion of burning, looting, sometimes murder, all kinds of things. Why would you promote that? Why would you promote the productive teachings of somebody like Dr. King, who was talking about nonviolence, getting along, all that kind of stuff? And why do you have on a Facebook page all these things about, and I can give to you because I copied the Facebook page and now it's been scrubbed of all of these things about LGBTQ and some of the things I don't even know what it means, that they're in support of, and they want youth to come and talk to them about it, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm going, that just doesn't feel right personally. I don't feel good about that. So we need to have an upcoming meeting about this to discuss this item because it really bothers me to have this going on in our community when, as you find out and do research, 13 to 17-year-olds brains have not fully formed. It isn't until you're about 25 where your brain is fully formed and can understand what's going on. So are we actually helping, or are we ushering into certain directions? I don't know, but I'm really concerned about this whole thing. And there's Coos Health and Wellness is supporting this program to the tune of $230,000 for 3 or 4 people, besides other monies that they get in. So I'm going, and then I read where Coos Health and Wellness, especially health, or wellness, I mean, has 2 people on staff to deal with this issue. So why is it being farmed out? Well, I need to have an upcoming discussion with the board and the other people who might be of interest to really flesh this out and see if it's advisable to continue on or not to have this any longer. Apparently it's being pushed from the state on down, unfortunately. And with that,
Bob, I got one more thing.
Yeah.
Finish, I left some conversation or some topics off. The things I talked about are things that I think we've been pretty successful in doing in getting non-tax dollars to operate the county. Where we have tried but haven't prevailed is to get tax dollars or revenue share, and in lieu of tax payments from our federal forest lands and our state forest lands. And it's not because we haven't tried. Going right down the line, we have a large amount, several thousand acres, hundreds of thousands of acres, a couple of 100,000 acres of O&C, Oregon, California Railroad lands managed by the BLM in this county. We, along with other counties, have joined in a lawsuit to get them to increase their harvest. They are way below the harvest levels they are supposed to be at under the O&C Act. So far, we prevailed, but it's under appeal. Then we have the Coos Bay Wagon Road lands, some 75,000 acres, 60,000 of which lie in our county. From those lands, we get payments in lieu of taxes. We disagree with the way the BLM calculates those payments. We couldn't bring them to the negotiating table. We sued, we lost. So it's not that we haven't tried, it's just that we lost. And we've been, as a board, this last 10 years, we've been very aggressive pursuing these avenues of additional, other boards, other counties have talked about them for decades. We acted, it didn't work out so good. Then we have the state-operated county forest trust lands. Bob mentioned that. There are 700,000 acres in total, 600,000 in Western Oregon. Those are the ones that we put into a habitat conservation plan, they call, which would eliminate harvest on 55% of that acreage. We have 7,200 acres of those lands. The state's hardly harvested anything on that at all. So we're not losing much, but we had never had much from it. We were part of a lawsuit of all the counties that were involved against the state and the Oregon Department of Forestry. We won originally, and then we lost on appeal at the state Court of Appeals, and the state Supreme Court has refused to hear the case. So it's just, the reality of it is, it's hard to prevail over the state and the federal governments when it comes to management of these lands. Not that we haven't tried. Like we tried harder than this county and this commission and the last commission tried harder than anyone, I think, has in the history of the county getting their money back. And so far we haven't prevailed. So, more bad news, but it's reality. And at some point in time, that's what we have to confront. So,
well, along the line, the ONC forest lawsuits, there are 15 counties involved in this lawsuit. It is based on the resource management plan, the RMP, that the BLM is proposing, which in Coos County, we'll have 5% of the harvestable land base that we once had in the BOC. 5%.
We already have it. That was enacted in 2016.
We won both lawsuits. I won't go into what they are, but we won both lawsuits. We won them on appeal, and now the Biden administration and the green groups have appealed to the Federal Court of Appeals in Washington, D.C. on those decisions. And we're awaiting a court case on that. If we're non-successful, we hope to go to the Supreme Court of the United States for decision. Now with that, citizen comments, and where's Phil at? He's first one. Dick, you're next. Citizen comments? Dick, Mort? Dick is finally back with us again. He's not been feeling well, so good to see you again. You're up and about.
Barely. Welcome back, Dick. Good to see you.
Thank you. One thing, you have to change the sound system. I can't hear everything.
That's your sound system, not ours.
And
they've had worked on it 4 or 5 times now. They worked on the sound system 4 or 5 times, had 2 sound engineers in here, and it's still not real great.
we need a couple more speakers back here or something.
We need some stuff there.
What I'm gonna comment on, I should have done it earlier, probably. You got the bicycle riders out there, the area for them to ride to, out to the woods.
In the county forest, yeah.
And you got the ATV trails out there.
Right.
Winchester Trail.
Right.
And you have to drive out to a road you wanna drive down, and there's this lock gate across it. sign says open for daily use only, but it's false. So how can you get down the road with a vehicle? But they want a gate on it, and the sign says it should be open during the daylight.
I'm unaware of that.
This falls under your guys, locking them up. I mean, a lot of people during hunting season couldn't get down the road to hunt because the gates.
Quite often when the gates are locked, during hunting season, that's when fire season is on. So that's the reason they lock them up during fire season. We can't afford to lose that. That's the only thing that supports all the other general fund departments that operate in the county.
The county forest belongs to the club.
I understand that, but it's the protection of the forest that we're most interested in. So if somebody doesn't start a fire and wipe it out, and then we're left with no revenue, that seems to outweigh one person's right to walk down there or drive down there to go out in the forest or go hunting. Because we're very concerned about losing multi-millions of dollars for the timber. Somebody smoking or starting a campfire, which they do all the time. And we catch them once in a while, but quite often we don't catch them. And if that fire spreads, we're in deep trouble trying to operate the county.
You guys base everything on that. Just one person might do this that stops 99% of the people.
I don't often engage in debate during citizen comments, but I'm going to today. I've been out in our forest. I've seen where people have shot up, brought household trash out there and used it as a target and left it lying. I've seen where they put targets on trees, one after another at the end of this road, and shoot those. So we can't sell those logs. I've seen it where they got their jollies off with an automatic gun, actually mowed down a tree. I've seen it when they've taken bags of hog innards out there and dumped them somewhere that someone in our department has to clean it up. I've seen them go out there and actually steal logs, cut them into pieces, wood, logs that are cold decked to be picked up by a log truck on Monday, and they're sawed into wood on Sunday. I've seen people out there camping and building fires. I've seen fires started out there without camping, just for the fun of it. Yes.
Seen trees cut down for fun.
Pardon me?
Trees
cut down for fun, just lying there. So I acknowledge that everyone should have a right to go out in the forest. I would love that to be the case. We also have an obligation. We swear in the Bible that we will protect the assets of this county when we take office. And so sometimes those two things are in conflict with one another. And I'm sorry, but I'm not terribly sympathetic because of the risk. We have a multi-hundreds of $1,000,000 forest out there. No, probably an exaggeration, but a lot of money and a lot of value, and it's very important to the state, to the county's continued operation. And frankly, I don't know that we have enough staff on our forestry department to go around every evening and shut the gates and go out in the morning and open them up. Dick, I'm sympathetic, but I don't know what to do.
There's an ordinance, you guys put the sign.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So that's where I'm coming from. And we had a debate here.
Well, it's open to walking, and maybe it's not open to cars.
That you guys, somebody painted the Forest Service, the Lancer, you or somebody put them red circles on the trees where they've been shot up. And I said, here's what make the targets.
The trees I'm talking about being shot up, these were not put on there by our people. And that might be a tree or two here or there that maybe got shot up or didn't get shot up. But sure as hell, the trees I saw were all shot up.
Well, I know that. I've been out there, it's been going for 20 years or more.
I know you have. Okay, this is why I don't comment during public comment. It takes too much time.
It's a really difficult problem, Dick. I think you may have heard me speak before about the fact that we should have access to those forest lands. And the fact of the matter is that we do by foot. That doesn't address it for everybody, I understand. But these, the problem of the loss of those assets is very real. And it's not the 1 and the 99, unfortunately. I wish morality were that common, but it appears that it's really not. And former County Commissioner Gordon Ross used to buy radio commercials, and in one of them, he said Coos County would save over $10 million a year if everybody would just live by the teachings of Jesus. Well, he's right about that, but we can't regulate that. We can't pass an ordinance. There are a couple of creative ideas around mechanisms by which to facilitate access to those roads with a vehicle for certain individuals and be able to record what's happening. But frankly, I'm not yet convinced that those ideas are workable. But believe me, I know that we're all concerned about that. And
I'm coming from health problems, disability.
I understand.
That likes to go out in the woods.
Yeah.
They're out.
I understand.
Okay, Dick, I'm sorry. I'm glad you're back. Come again.
Bill Thompson, do you have something? Uh-oh, okay. Anybody else want to jump in on citizen comments?
Yes.
Did Rob say something?
Oh, Rob's online?
Yes.
Hang on, Rob.
And I would like to say, I was with them at one time on private county land until I actually got in behind one of the gates and seen that they built on the ranch. All the garbage, piles and piles and piles of garbage. I was disgusted and I was glad they put gates up after that. But I'll tell you, freedom plus morality equals liberty.
That's right.
When you lose your morality, you lose your liberty.
That's true.
It's that easy.
Okay. Rob Taylor?
Thank you, Tom.
Rob, you there?
Yeah, yes, I'd like to comment on, and this is great that you brought public comment back because this is something that would normally not be discussed at a meeting. But Bob, you and I were just targeted in an article in the World newspaper, and I'm going to read you a clip out of it. It says, Commissioner Bob Main got the "I'll sue you" holler from Taylor, that is me, about a month ago when Maine eliminated the commissioner meetings, the public comment portion of the morning, as it had become an unruly free-for-all with Taylor and the rest of the Citizens Restoring Liberty crowd regularly hijacking the meetings. Now, this is from Tracy Hodson, who accuses me of being a bigot and being loudmouth. And I am a loudmouth, but I'm certainly not a bigot. And when I said that you would face a lawsuit when you threatened to kick me out, it had nothing to do with suing you for not having public comment. That is absolutely ridiculous, and I want you to know that Tracy Hodson wrote a 900-word article, and probably 800 of those words are nothing but lies, and I just wanted to say that at the public meeting because the statement she made occurred at one of the regular board meetings. And as far as the forest goes, John, I agree with you. I hate the litter bugs. I hate the people who go out there and do bad things. But I'll tell you what, there's a lot of us who have done cleanup in the woods. In fact, we've gone out there and I pulled out tons of garbage out of the public woods because we didn't want to get maligned with a lot of the shooters who go out there and target the trees and bring out TVs and other garbage to shoot up. It's just frustrating. It's disgusting. But I want you to know there are a lot of people who care about the forest just as much as you do. And, you know, the city of Coos Bay and North Bend have been having cleanup days. Maybe the county could organize a cleanup day for all of us to go out there and clean up some of these public areas. I would be more than happy happy to volunteer for that myself. And I want to thank you all for having an excellent meeting today. It was incredibly good, and I appreciate you guys doing what you've done. And those are my comments.
All righty, who's next? William? Oh, you're, come on up, sir.
I just, first of all, I just mentioned the problem with tax revenue during the state. And we have to go kind of like this turning in the other things that deal that between now and this election, get something done out. Publicizing in this county has everything built into that people saying the thing, whatever it is, on the ballot because it's the county's not to and increasing taxes.
So if you don't know, 30 out of 36 counties are conservative, we being one of the 30. It's the other 6 that run the state. Yeah, so you need to have folks in those counties actually run for office and change out the legislature who makes some of these most ridiculous laws that I've ever seen, like the Menstrual Dignity Act and the riot stuff on the police where they can't use tear gas and stuff on rioters. They can't publish the pictures of people who've been arrested in the media anymore, all that kind of stuff. Besides this thing I was talking about earlier on the promotion of transgender, etc., you have to change out the state legislature and the governor's office in order to change out all those folks who are promoting this kind of CRAP. Yeah, my personal
Did you
opinion.
spell that out loud?
Yeah.
Well, I think maybe the key would be use the same tool that they do, like they're passing these crazy laws. Some of them that you know, one thing just how it's worded. So you would need to get up to those 6 counties to
What?
twist it in such a way that it's still the same way, but more obvious. It's like you stated.
Or just like eliminating the date stamp on late ballots that come in by the post office. They did that in 21 legislative season. You no longer have to have a date stamp on late ballots. Well, I'm not necessarily my personal views. I don't know how to say this other than I don't necessarily trust the system in certain counties. I have real difficulty with that because it is not normal for a governing body of the state to be in control since the mid-'80s when we had vote by mail. That doesn't normally happen. If you look at the national elections, it goes Republican, Democrat, Democrat, Republican, Republican, Democrat, whatever. But it's not the same every year. So I would suggest that folks who are highly concerned about this try and somehow marshal the forces in those 6 counties to change things. The other 30 counties were all conservative.
How about a ballot measure by those 30 counties to kick the other 6 out? They can go be their own state.
Well, there is that problem too, in that the whole greater Idaho and the Jefferson County thing. Well, I researched that, and apparently the Oregon legislature and the Idaho legislature would both have to agree, if they did, which seems almost impossible, And then it goes to US Congress to agree. For me, I just like to cut out the greater, the metro area up there called, whatever it is called, the riot area, and give them to Washington State so we keep the rest of our state, but it's not up to me either. Yeah, just my personal rant about this whole thing, I guess.
Thank you, Bruce.
Because it's not good.
Bill.
Anybody else? William? You go by William or Bill?
William.
That's what I thought.
Nobody wants to build stuff. Using that name a long time ago. Well, I just want to thank you. I'm William Hayes. I'm Mark Point. I want to thank you, gentlemen. I just want you to know that I usually don't get involved in this kind of stuff. It's not personal. I've all my life, and I've been sent mayors, I've been sent different people to do certain things I didn't really want to do. Just for the best interest of the time, stuff like that. So that's why I'm here today as well. The Bible makes it clear, and you invoked the Bible once, you said yourself here today, which could have offended people. And Jesus' name is already mentioned once. So, being that said, the Bible declares that there's 2 or 3 witnesses verifies whether something should be looked at. Concerned. According to that, the First Amendment has those things. I'll just go ahead and read it. Congress shall not make no law respecting the establishment of any religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That's number 1. Or the abridging of the freedom of speech, number 2. Or of the press, or of the right of the people to assemble, number 3, and to petition the government for the redress of grievances. So there's your 3 witnesses in the Constitution, which we believe and know that when it was done, they were having a hard time writing it. And so Benjamin Franklin decided, hey, let's stop this and just pray. And with that, they were able to put the thing together, get some consensus. So I believe God had his hand on this place, this nation from the very beginning, and still does. And so it's really important that you gentlemen know morality and what goes on in the city or the county or a country. Makes and breaks what that country is going to be or how it's going to be. And so with that, I thought I was supposed to say this to you also. Again, Ephesians 5:11 says, have nothing to do with fruitfulness, deeds of darkness, but rather exposure. And so it's our duty as believers sometimes to stand up when we don't want to. It's cost many of our brothers and sisters around the world their lives. And they'd rather do that than not. Because it's just who we are. We die first when God asks us to do something, regardless of what we didn't say. So I just want to thank you again for allowing us to be able to speak and even invoke the name of Jesus Christ in these rooms when government is being functional. So with that, I just want to say thank you, Lord Jesus, for these men, for this nation, and for this county, and what he's going to be doing in it to make it a better place. I know we all want that. And so I want to thank him and you gentlemen, all, and God himself, for what he's doing here. God bless you.
Thank you, William.
Anybody else? With that, we're adjourned. Thank you all. Mike?